short. Hi, I'm Kate. In 2011, I lost my tribe. I found out what exile feels like. I was a doctor. I moved to Springfield in 1987 and went to medical school here and did my pediatric residency here, and then I was on faculty at the medical school. And I was your classic workaholic type. And then I can't explain how, because no one can when they're in this situation, but I became addicted to a drug. And because my addiction to approval was greater than my addiction to a substance, I couldn't ask for help. And in the end, my life imploded because I couldn't ask for help. So I had a meeting with the HR department, and they let slip that they were going to call the Department of Justice. And so I was terrified. I was afraid to go home. I thought DEA agents were going to show up and haul me away from my children. And I hid in the park that day. I went to Washington Park to the duck pond. It was cold. It was a freezing rain. I was just so ashamed and so terrified. I didn't know what to do. And my husband finally hunted me down and convinced me to go home. And we got home, and we didn't even have our coats off before a big black shiny SUV pulled in the drive, and 2 DEA agents stepped out. And they treated me with much more kindness than I expected. And when they left, I said, "You mean you're not hauling me away?" And they kind of laughed, and they didn't. And so I went off to treatment, and I came home. It was winter. I was too ashamed to be seen. All of my friends were in the medical community. I had no one because my whole life had been spent in the hospital. So I didn't quite know what to do with myself, but finally it got warm and spring came, and I started going to the park. And I sat by the duck pond, and this time, instead of it being cold, it was warm, and there was a wood duck and 2 babies, and across the pond there was a swan. And they were beautiful, and I started going to the park every single day and sitting in the duck pond, and it got to be a very hot summer that summer. It was a drought. I sat under a tree that there was a circle of shade, and they didn't trust me, these critters, but they came to trust me. I took bread every day, and I sat in the park because that was where I found peace, and I didn't feel judged, and I wasn't ashamed to be with the ducks and the swan. Well, they started coming to me. When I got to the park, I would yell. I named the swan Athena, don't ask why, but I would yell for Athena, and she would whip her head around and come paddling as fast as she could to me and sit at my feet until I left. And I fed bread to her, and she ate out of my hand, and this was a big swan. One time, a very friendly golden retriever bounded over to say hello to me, and she perceived it as a ferocious predator. And she decided to defend me against this friendly dog, puffed up to twice her size, and this poor pup ran off terrified. Now it's June, and I have to appear in court for my arraignment. And that was, it was okay. I was treated, again, very respectfully. And I felt okay, you know. I took responsibility for what I had done, and everything was okay until the next day when a big story about me was on the front page of the State Journal Register, and I was on the Channel 17 News. Well, now the shame, I couldn't be seen. So I just laid low. I didn't go to the grocery store, and I stayed going. I went to the park every day because my ducks and my swan, they didn't care. And they were always there. So that went on, and November rolls around. It's cold now, and I have to go to court again for my sentencing. And in my sentencing, you know, it's a federal courthouse with all these mahogany benches. Every seat was filled, and it was filled with members of the recovery community from AA. And the judge said he'd never seen anything like it. And I realized at that point that I had a new tribe. It was just a very different tribe. It was people who approved of me, even knowing the absolute worst, most shaming things about me. Well, a few months passed, and it got cold, and the pond iced over, and Athena finally left. She had to leave because there was no open water. And I missed her, but I was glad because she'd be safe. Spring rolled around. I wanted her to come back, but she didn't. And I looked for her every day, and she didn't. And every time I drove around town and passed the lake, I'd stop, get out if I saw swans, and yell, "Athena!" Never saw her. And then in 2015, 3 years later, I'm at a friend's house. There's a swan across the lake. I yell her name. A head whips around, and that swan comes paddling to me and lays its head on my lap. Thank you.